Look at the map, Walter.
What is that a reference?
Oh, that Olmert looks like Mike from Breaking Bad.
Oh my god, you're right.
Talks a little bit, yeah. I can see it.
Is he as badass? That's the question.
Yeah.
So you think the interview was good?
Yeah.
Anything like you're like, oh, I wish I had time to get this kind of question in?
I mean, I could fight with someone in Lebanon for like 3 hours, but it's like going into different intel reports about how quickly Hezbollah was able to rebuild their arsenal and shit like that, because I think he was a bit more kind to himself than other people have been. Or about like how it was okay for a bunch of IDF guys to just start adding new military goals because they thought their airstrikes were better than they were. And obviously only like half of them were achieved. So,
Okay.
I don't know. But yeah, that could have gone really far into that. But.
That was interesting. You got to hear his point of view about the whole napkin thing.
To the wrong direction.
Yeah. Because that's not very easy to find online, like that story.
Yeah. Man, you guys would both be armed with so many things. Next time you guys argue with someone online, you'd be like, I have firsthand. Would that be considered firsthand? No. What kind of sourcing is that if you heard straight from the guy?
Primary, yeah,
it's a primary source?
There's a fucking, well, it's more than a primary source, isn't it? Because it's like, yeah, the interview that's a primary source.
Yeah.
100%.
I heard it straight from the
horse's head.
Exactly. From Omer's mouth.
Oh, sorry.
I'm curious how some of you guys' biggest haters are gonna. How do you twist this strip?
Well, for talking to him.
You have as much hate or no?
Well, for talking to him, I would get like, that's the guy who fucking bombed my country. My fucking grandmother had to leave and shit for like she didn't leave that long.
Yeah.
And she's on a plane because she was in Beirut. She was fine. I think even my aunt and cousins were in East Beirut when that started, so they had to leave early and shit. But again, like, they weren't in the thick of it. Right?
Take a right? What was because I know nothing, but like, what was the reason for the bombing?
Because Hezbollah were firing fucking 12,000 rockets in the space of 6 years at Israel, and their deterrence reaction strikes weren't working, so Hezbollah kidnapped 2 soldiers, murdered 8 people, and then Mr. Olmert was like, all right, we have to do something now.
So he bombed the city? Or like he bombed
the south, which is all these Shiite villages where Hezbollah were holed up in.
Yeah.
And so they airstriked a lot of these rocket launchers. They destroyed most of Hezbollah's medium and long-range rockets, but they found that it was very difficult to get the rest of it because they moved things around in tunnels all the time.
Yeah.
They eventually went for a ground invasion and realized that it was far more difficult than it was 20 years earlier. So people were getting ambushed, people were falling into booby traps, people were getting lost in tunnels, people were having like intelligence failures where they were leaking their own information over cell phones, which they were told not to do but they just didn't think these people were sophisticated enough to intercept it, but they were. They fucking bombed their TV station 15 times, but they only stopped broadcasting for 2 minutes because they had like a backup system so that the leader could broadcast his propaganda messages. So they got kind of humiliated in a way. Like they thought that they could destroy Hezbollah completely and make them political. Like some people thought that. Other people thought the official messages was that they were going to get the hostages back and destroy their medium long-range rockets.
Yeah.
The hostages, it turns out, they actually they already knew they were dead. They basically.
They died already.
Yeah, they knew that the 2 hostages, the kidnapped soldiers, had died already. Or they were like 99% sure.
Damn.
They just used that to get international support for the war. Yeah. But by the end of it, after 6 weeks of that, they had to pull out. And the rockets that stopped, Hezbollah did not do what they were doing 6 years prior. So there was no more kids having to grow up running to bomb shelters in Israel in the north for a while. But because the expectations were set so high, Hezbollah's leader just got to say, well, I didn't lose, I didn't die, so this is like a divine victory. They actually got the best kill ratio of their soldiers to Israeli soldiers than any Arab army since 48. So they killed like 120 Israeli soldiers in exchange for losing 500, 600 guys at most.
500 to 100?
500 to 6, yeah, but that's a good ratio in Arab army against Israel. and Nasrallah got much more popular than he was in the past. He was before that. I think like 80+% of the Lebanese population supported Hezbollah's actions, including the majority of Christians, which would never have been the case before that. They took in a bunch of money from Iran really quickly to rebuild all the infrastructure that was destroyed, and they got to claim that they were like not only the resistance fighters but also the rebuilders of Lebanon. They managed to, well, Olmert denies this, but intel reports were saying that they got to rebuild their rocket inventory fairly quickly, even though they didn't use it. One of the IDF's goals was they were dropping flyers to try and spread these kind of messages, like images and text, to argue that Hezbollah was the one who was dragging Lebanon into the dirt, and that it was his fault that the bombings were happening, and that they wanted to turn the population against them. It completely failed. Because as much as Lebanese people might not like Hezbollah, they definitely hate Israel more. So, yeah.
Is that still true now?
I don't know. Probably. But I think when it came to Israel, most people believed that neither side won. In Lebanon, they mostly say they did, that Lebanon won, but they also, let's not do that again because it was fucked. And Olmert convinced himself that, there were mistakes made, but we destroyed their big long-range rockets, and then they stopped firing rockets while I was for the rest of my prime minister period.
Okay.
Everything that happened after 2009 when he left was someone else's problem.
Right.
So
How long was he?
I'd call that a bit of cope. I think he copes a bit.
How long was he in power?
2.5 years, 3 years, 2006 to 2009. So he was actually saying everything that happens after 2009, not my problem. Like, fucking hell, bro. He more or less said that. But I don't know. Like, again, I can understand why they did it, because it's not nice having 12,000 rockets fired at your country for 6 years. But they definitely fucked up. They were very arrogant. They had very high expectations, and they paid the price for it. But obviously, the problem is that you were asking if people were going to give me shit for it. Yeah, because my family was there when the Israeli bombing started. They had to flee, so it's like fucking self-hating argument. But it's quite easy to deal with that, because at the end of the day, the whole point of peace in this region is that people who fucking hate each other and people who have done all kinds of horrible things have to talk to each other.
Yeah.
Like an Israeli one day is possibly going to have to sit across the table from Marwan Barghouti, who committed terror attacks in the 2000s and murdered people, civilians.